lovelies, it's comments time again. Hope you're all doing well. I'm combining comments from this channel and the Grimstreams channel because last night I went into a rather interesting article that has since been removed from Medium about all the kind of back-channel harassment and nastiness that goes on within the RPG industry, and it's not from the people you might think. It's from the quote good people end quote. You know the type, the righteously indignant types. But anyway, I went through the whole article live, which is unusual for me, but you can find it over on Grimstreams, and a link to the article as well. It mentioned me, not by name, but it also goes in deep into a case study on Zach Smith, who is a dick, but does very much appear to be the victim of a long-running harassment campaign. He's a dick and a pedant, and he doesn't know when to let things go, but he doesn't deserve what happened to him, and he is a case study of what has happened to perhaps a lesser degree to many of us, including me. So I think it's worth a listen. If you can't be bothered to hear me chuckling and groaning my way through the article, I'll pop a link below this video as well to the article, or it's over underneath that video. So yeah, been a bit of a weird 24 hours. Okay, so on my video on my top horror games, Ryotba says, I always thought of Morkborg's style as more of a 15-year-old's art project rather than grimdark. I guess I always associated grimdark with Warhammer Fantasy Battle 40k and John Blanche rather than a teenager scrapbook. Well, a lot of the people that worked on Warhammer at the time were pretty young, and what do you think the teenagers were doodling in their scrapbooks? What were they copying? What were they imitating? Yeah. Zombie Haiku says, Vampire the Masquerade, bought one of the first copies that Virgin Megastore brought over. Ran it for a decade, but don't think it updates well to a contemporary setting. Too many smartphones. I mean, there's ways around that. It does make things more dangerous, but the setting has kind of incorporated that idea that modern technology makes things a lot more dangerous for vampires, though simultaneously it has weakened the Camarilla when it seems like their way of doing things would be more sensible and more successful in the more high-tech era, or the Anarchs, who are better at adapting to modern technology. But still, I'm not a huge fan of the newer stuff, but it plays fine. We play it over on Tabletopless, and some of the setting stuff is fine. Smiler with a Gun says, great list. Do you have any theories as to why Call of Cthulhu is bigger than D&D in Japan? Seems like the Cthulhu mythos just hits different for Japanese audiences. A popular mountain climbing scenario for a Japanese Cthulhu-inspired TTRPG, Mountains of Madness, Summit of the Evil Gods, is even getting an anime adaptation. Looking forward to that. Yeah, that sounds interesting. I think part of it might be because D&D was a bit slow to get going in Japan, and also a big problem that D&D ran into in Japan was that polyhedral dice weren't very easy to come by, which is why Sword World was much more influential in Japan, despite being a fairly generic fantasy game in a lot of ways. But that doesn't explain why Call of Cthulhu would do so well. I mean, it doesn't use the full gamut of dice, depending on the edition, I suppose. There's that. maybe the 1920s holds a more interesting position in Japanese romanticism. I mean, that's what the Toisho era, after the Meiji era, Japan was kind of right at the height of a lot of its power and so on, after its rapid industrialization. Or it may be that they are enamored of the culture of America in the 1920s and 30s. There is quite a lot of American fanboyism in Japan, weirdly enough. So maybe that's what does it for them. I also think it's more investigative and more cooperative, a little bit less individualistic than other Western RPGs. I was watching an interesting video on what do they call them, Jushenya, which is kind of like LARPs that are big in China and other Asian countries. They're kind of a mix between murder mystery parties and LARPs and tabletop gaming. It's an odd thing. I might do a video on it myself at some point, or see if I can create something along those lines at some point. But that's kind of immersing yourself in history, the dressing up sometimes, the attitudes, that sort of thing, seems to be more appealing to an Asian mindset for whatever reason. That sounds racist, but I mean, there are differences in culture, differences between individualism and collectivism, and other aspects. So maybe that's why. Rich mythology as well, which maybe can be tapped into for Japanese Cthulhu. Short answer, I don't know, but I have some ideas. Maybe someone else can enlighten me. Gregory Campagna says, how about doing your top 10 vintage titles from the 70s and 80s that are still worth playing, if there are that many? I mean, it's going to be fairly predictable which ones are going to come through, because they're the ones that survive, and the ones that survive tend to be the ones that are still worth playing. Though there are a few games that have fallen by the wayside that might be worth mentioning. I don't know. On the AI art and ethics video, this continues to be a very contentious discussion, and I think both the AI boosters and the AI denigrators, neither of them are doing themselves many favours. Salsa Doom says, a machine can now produce something faster and more consistently than a highly skilled craftsperson. The highly skilled craftsman does not like it. The big players can afford to pay for the craftsman. They want to ban anyone else from using the cheaper and faster methods. They say it's to protect the craftsman and the consumer. If every product looks beautiful, how will consumers be able to tell the difference between high quality and low quality products at a glance? It's a threat to the existing order, which currently dominates distribution and production, but 90% plus of people just don't care. It's only a matter of time before money talks. Yeah, I do think there is an inevitability to it, regardless of how these various legal cases end up shaking out. It's as pointless as trying to resist industrialization. Crafted skills, crafted writing are going to become boutique and at a premium, I think. It's kind of depressing, but it's also kind of liberating. We went through all of this with Photoshop, and before that, airbrushing and photo manipulation, even before Photoshop. This is why I'm not taking any singular hard and fast position, and I'm constantly adapting. Right, so Griffith Morgan says, I have a lot to say on this subject. My take has nothing to do with the economic aspects. Wish your show had guests, because I'd love to come chat about it. This channel's for recorded videos. I do the occasional interview or discussion over on my other channel, Grim Streams. I mean, we could have a round table about that if there's a couple of other people. I just don't know how productive it would be. I'm running into something in discussing this that's very weird to me. There are people who anthropomorphize AI and treat it like it's alive or thinking or human, and there are people who think that there is something peculiar, particular, and special about human interaction, some ineffable something. It's really a spiritual belief, I think, and I don't share that. We're meat machines. We're still machines. The logic might be a bit fuzzier. It may be a black box that we don't understand entirely, but that's also true of AI and neural networks. You know, set it going, you train it, but you don't really know how it works after that point particularly well. So I see no spiritual component to humanity, not as people tend to mean that word. And these things are analogous between humans and AI. You know, a human is affected by their influences, what they trained on, what they copied, the teachers they had, all of that sort of stuff. And the AI is affected by what it ingests, what you tell it to do, the style cues and instructions that you give it. You know, all of those sorts of things. So it's not a one-for-one thing, but it is analogous, or analogous if you prefer. But I don't see anything. I don't see any sort of ineffable numinous quality to humanity. So we reach an impasse at that point, because I don't share people's spiritual beliefs, and don't see as much difference as they do, because they think there is something special about humans, and I don't. We're all just meat robots that we don't understand. That's all. Need More Cowbell says, I live in the engineering architectural world. If you're building a house, you want to spend as little time and money measuring and cutting as possible. You design to use common length timber and materials. You don't get creative about your spacing between studs. 16 inches in the US is nearly universal for a reason. The dumpster on your build site looks almost the same as every other dumpster made. Your power tools look the same as power tools designed and made by another company. It's not a matter of ethics, and no one gets butthurt about it. Engineers and architects borrow designs all the time because there's a limited number of options that will do the job cost effectively in that space. You make no money on projects you don't win, or products you don't make or can't sell. Is there a market for handcrafted items? Sure, but you have to find a buyer willing to pay a premium because of the increased labour and material costs. In many cases, the machine does a better job. No one complains that their Ford Explorer was painted by a robot. Nobody complains that a truck transports and unloads their dumpster. Nobody wants handcrafted framing fasteners that don't fit into your nailer. I think people would argue that art is different somehow. And to an extent it is, because it's all bespoke to one degree or another. Whereas these sort of architectural solutions aren't. But there's another way you can look at that. If you take a step back from the individual studs, lengths of timber and materials, and look at the building as a whole, that is the artistic product. And it may be different to other houses around it. And then when someone comes in and lives in it, decorates it, does whatever it is they do with the garden and so on, that's where you end up with the end product. It's a bit like Lego bricks. Yeah, you can make them in all kinds of different configurations, but the bricks are a part of a standardized set, right? So while an individual piece might be machine made, the overall is still an artistic expression. And maybe that's the way we need to look at it. Judd Goswick says, artists seem very concerned that AI is trained off prior artists, just like they were. Models, architects, fashion designers and craftsmen all have their work replicated by artists in their work, if only by inspiration and example. Where is the bottom of this pit? Yeah, it's an analogy, and all analogies break down under close examination. But how can we differentiate between these things? That's where the really sticky wicket is, as far as I'm concerned. If an AI is not allowed to ingest, modify, combine, and spit out new artwork based off old artwork, how do we allow humans to continue to do that? Right? If AI isn't allowed to train by copying, essentially, how do we find a way around that to allow humans to train by copying? Some people might say, well, just say it's okay for humans, it's not okay for machines. Well, that's a bit problematic in its own ways, especially if you look forward into the future. There's no good answers, and we need to find a new equilibrium, and that will take time, and there will be people that don't want to. Lord Charles says, I think you're walking the sensible middle ground that will likely become our standard one day, and I agree with pretty much everything here in one form or another. Honestly, the thing that annoys me most are the extremes, big shock I know, of how either there's a completely unsympathetic, like the coal miner your time is up, pro-AI stance, and the it's blatant theft and you should feel awful anti-AI stance, which will otherwise readily jump to the defense of anything transformative, such as a collage or parody of copyrighted material. And you touched on an important point regarding legislation affecting human artists, when I already see and have engaged with people who will intentionally shit on AI art with such generic arguments that can apply to stock art or even paid for art. Implications that the individuals who don't pay artists aren't talented, are lazy, and that art doesn't matter if your book is good. The last point is technically not wrong, but I've yet to see anyone who says that and has a book on their shelf lacking art, but a grain of salt with anecdotes. A final note I can contribute to genuine conversation is the point I often hear of, why don't you just learn to draw? Not to get too personal or deep, but the question comes preloaded with the idea that everyone is physically capable of producing art, let alone the type of art they need for a project. It just rubs me the wrong way, as someone who is still working to get his skills back up after an injury, especially since a lot of this anti-AI stuff comes from people who otherwise advocate for accessibility tools. Yeah, true. And there are a lot of people that take their own sketches and put them into AI to have it finish or pose or whatever according to their sketch. Yet again, it's not easy. Yeah, I'm an art school dropout. I did learn to draw. I was never brilliant, but I was okay. But art school crushed that love of creating art out of me to a very large degree. So yeah, that's a really arrogant thing. It's probably a response to the learn to code thing, or learn to prompt, as some AI evangelicals have been putting out more recently. Honestly, what pushes me the most is the AI profits push me against AI art, and the Luddites on the other side push me the opposite way. Now you can say, oh, well, the Luddite movement got a bad press, that's not what it was about yet. But everyone understands what you mean when you say Luddites. People who oppose technology, whatever the reasons or righteousness of their causes, they oppose technology. And how did that go? What about sabotage? Right? How did that end up? Did industrialization stop or even slow down because of these people? No, they ended up jobless and without clogs. So it's an evolve or die time, really, I think. Sadly. Let's see. Dave Morris, good old Dave, says, I completely agree. There's a lot of hysteria regarding AI art, no doubt based on fear of lost income, but I don't think it's actually replacing many genuine paid gigs. I use AI art for blog posts, but I wouldn't pay for art on a blog post anyway. When I have funds for art, I'll hire real artists, but if a project needs art and I don't have the money, should I junk the project or find a free alternative? In the past, I've gone and found public domain art. Now I can get nearer to what's needed with AI. In neither case did a human artist lose out on a payday. Your point about how AI learns is also quite right. What would Barry Windsor Smith's drawing look like without the pre-Raphaelites, for example, or Bernie Wrightson without Graham Ingalls and Franklin Booth? It's how all artists learn, human or artificial. What is more depressing is that the AI is increasingly training on its own output and or on derivative human stuff on DeviantArt, with the result that it produces content in a fixed MOR style. 6 months ago I could ask for something in the style of, say, Harry Clark and get an interesting image. Good luck trying that now. Yeah, I think Jim Burns said something similar a while back, that he was getting less interesting results increasingly. Despite modelling the AI on his own work and style, which is another thing that I think we need to think about. Is it unethical if you train it on your own work and use it? And I think, moving forward, what's going to happen? Will you be able to bequeath your art model to someone to continue to produce art after your death, and will that maintain it in copyright? And yeah. But I agree with Dave. I don't, at least the way I am using AI, it is not costing anyone any work. And there's an interesting question that throws up, right? So for thumbnails, previously I would just do a Google image search, find something I liked, blow it up, shrink it down, add some text, tweak the vibrance and the contrast, and that would be about it. So I was essentially stealing art directly, right? Because YouTube's not profitable, nobody cares. Where's the problem? But is that more or less ethical than getting AI to generate something? Because the AI is not ripping off anyone singularly. It's not doing anyone out of work, and I'm not just stealing somebody's art for use on a blog or a YouTube video or whatever else. So square that circle if you can. T-shirted Historian says, another area this gets sticky with is photo manipulation. It's not uncommon for someone to feed an existing picture or piece into an AI and use that as a base to work from, altering it depending on the prompt's style choices and other variables you feed into the prompt. For years, people have escaped claims using photo manipulation, and this technology makes it even easier and almost its own art form because it alters the original, often significantly. If AI gets called to the carpet, I'm having trouble saying AI today, I don't know why, then this can also affect the artists who use photo manipulation as the basis for their artistic endeavours. And yeah, that takes us back to how do you legislate against AI art without necessarily inflicting problems on regular artists, human artists. Someone mentioned in a comment, oh no, it's coming up. I did bring it out. We'll get to that when we get to that. Weird Guy 564 says, I make my own art. I always have. Mine is mostly 3D stuff, but that counts to me. I will use AI art for any book I ever intend to write myself. The key being, it is all done by me. I don't use outside material. But if I make a 3D model of a US Navy battleship using 2D art blueprints, is it my art or a copy of the 2D art? However, can AI art be stopped? You're nuts. This is the way it will be from now on. Fatalistic, but probably true. There's a legal case in the courts at the moment, unrelated to AI, but kind of related in a way. The tattoo artist Kat Von D, who is a total bitch, but that's irrelevant to the point here. She tattooed someone. Excuse me. She tattooed someone with a famous picture of Miles Davis, and has been taken to court for copyright infringement for copying that photo without paying the original photographer. So is transferring that to a medium with all the subtle changes and so on that go on, especially given the history of tattoo artists tattooing people with copyrighted IP and so on, and being allowed to, where does that stand? Is it transformative? Is it transformative enough? Is the fact that it is a tattoo and can't be sold off someone's skin, is that the issue? She is making money, but it's not like just claiming it as her own or making a photocopy. So it's interesting. It kind of tangentially relates to some of these issues. Dane Minton says, my main point is art is valued by humans from the expressions of humans. Synthesizing that is profane when intention is the majority of the value. Is it though? My old art tutor, one of the good ones, used to say that art is 10% talent and 90% bullshit. And the intention that we get from pieces of art, it's largely down to the bullshit. So, Damien Hirst became a success by essentially becoming a label, a shortcut. This is modern cutting edge art. I own a piece by this guy. That's what makes it meaningful. But the execution wasn't always necessarily that great or innovative. A lot of his pieces were callbacks to previous pieces, but it was it was how fashionable his work was that mattered. There's a Japanese concept of wabi-sabi, which is perfectly imperfect, which is what you will get from human art to a degree. So maybe we're just going to end up with a very small group of crafters, essentially, who demand a premium for their services, which people are willing to pay for because it's not perfect, because it's not easy, because it's more expensive, and it's a signifier. I mean, we're already seeing, we don't use AI art as a signifier, a virtue signal, right? Same as with other things that have arguably caused a lot of problems in creative spaces, like DEI and so on. Look at us, aren't we good people? Our products might be shit, but we have the right people on board. Is this going to end up the same way? Don't know. Magnificent Devil says, those who do not remember history are doomed to repeat it. The DMCA was passed in 1998 on the grounds that it would protect artists by ensuring they were paid for their work. In practice, it empowered the RIAA to enact legal action against ordinary people, and the royalties owed to smaller artists were consumed by administrative costs of collecting those royalties. The big corporations gained far more power, small businesses were destroyed, and independent artists became entirely dependent on conglomerates to distribute their music. Pushing against AI art will do the same thing. Or, similar to a lot of musicians, push them underground. Alright, moving on. Catalyst Game Labs. You may remember they put out a statement which seemed innocuous, but probably wasn't. Thor's Hammer says, they fail to realise that now is not a good time to antagonise the customer base. When angry, the printer go brrrr, especially for older gamers with massive collections. We don't need Catalyst's games. They need us to survive. We survived the fall of FASA, the ClickTech Dark Age, the disappointment of the BattleTech PC game, thankfully redeemed by the modding community. Love my 3062. We are the cockroaches of gaming. I mean, well, yeah, that's... to an extent, that's true, right? And it kind of relates back to the AI discussion, because technology marches ever on, and now people can 3D print, and if they want to, they can scan existing miniatures and create 3D prints. And yeah, it's a bit black market and all that, but the point is that if you don't maintain and retain the goodwill of your customer base, they have no reason to give you money. They can continue without you. Someone could retroclone the rules of Battletech or improve on them in some ways, and yeah, you're not necessary anymore to them. So pissing off your customer base seems like a really bad idea, but maybe they're hoping they can retain that other smaller part of their customer base or extend it to other people, which hasn't worked for anyone else in the recent past. So good luck with that. Dak Darklighter says, I have no comment on the situation. I just wanted to say your drip and aesthetic is baller as fuck. Having run that through a translator, thank you. Gunnar Lipens says, I feel like you dropped the ball a little by not actually making this video about the CGL case, which you barely mention, instead going on about a lot of other incidents. While I agree on some of your general points, in this case I feel it's kind of important to look at the stuff that has actually happened in this specific circumstance. Stuff like the BT subreddit blanket banning any LGBT plus fan content last year, which led to a lot of drama and upheaval. So in this case, I would say this message is an understandable step to make it clear we do not stand for that. Yes, these rules can be used to deplatform people and stuff, but if there is actual suppression going on platforms, which there very much was and is, should you not take a stand against it, just out of fear that it might rub people the wrong way? I don't tend to go into the specifics of drama, he says, having just recorded a 2-hour live stream last night going into the specifics of drama, but generally speaking, I don't. Incidents like this are an opportunity to take a step back and look at the broader state of affairs that is going on. If you want the gossip, there are plenty of other channels that will provide you with the gossip. I even linked to a video that recaps everything, but that's not usually what we do here. Okay, I prefer to take a slightly more remote, analytical, contextual view on events. It would be easier and more lucrative to create outrage videos, but I like to tap into the outrage to lead people to other things, greater understanding, rather than just reactivity. Whether I succeed or not is up for question, but that's what I'm trying to do. On the Robotech Retro Review, Jeff Remdenkar, something, says, Palladium books have been the main set of games for my old group for decades. I asked Kevin at a convention about Robotech, and they had to come up with a lot of stuff because there was a fair number of notes missing, so they had to create it themselves. In one case, they had to buy a high-end VCR and pause the tapes at certain points to count the missiles being fired to figure out how many missiles each mecha carried. But if you're looking for the best examples of lore from their first run of the game, some of the secondary splat books would be what you're looking for. I mean, I'm glad they went to that amount of effort, but isn't that telling that they bought a high-end video cassette recorder and went through it frame by frame to note down the number of missiles, rather than coming up with a new system that better emulated the content of what was shown, or modifying their own system to better emulate what was going on the screen? Isn't that just Palladium to the core? GM Jeremy says 3 average for style. Based on what scale? I loved Perez's art because I also take into account the writing, the presentation, the layout, and whether the system emulates the right sort of style and feel in play. So while the art is fantastic in the Robotech books, the rest of the content lets it down a long way. Gregory Campagna says, I've heard of other RPG channels refusing to cover Palladium products. Why might that be? I don't know. If I had to speculate, it would be because of their failed Kickstarters and their failure to treat their freelancers and so on well. There's a tendency within Palladium that they will agree to some work from a freelancer. They will produce the work. The work will be quote rejected unquote and rewritten by someone in-house, and then they either don't get paid or get paid a fraction of what they were promised. I think this happened with Dead Rain. There are other somewhat famous incidents as well. If I were to take a stance against Palladium, it would probably be for those reasons. But yeah, there's a lot of bad blood over Kickstarters more recently, so that may be why. But I do not know. On the Too Many Grogs video, Andy Action says, I'm so glad there are brave folks out there like Jim Grimm to protect the rights and reputations of older straight white men. They really have had a tough run. I mean, someone always has to come out of the woodwork to prove me right, don't they? So thank you, Andy, for demonstrating the sexism, racism, and ageism I was making the point about. And everyone has had a tough run, and men often get very little sympathy, despite having had a tough run. So go stick your head in a pig. Falling Tower 969 says, the first time I heard about LOTFP was from two guys I overheard talking about the author, who they said moved to Scandinavia because he was an extreme racist. This took place in a vendor area at a small Michigan game convention. I knew nothing about LOTFP or its creators. I did a quick Google and found that these guys' opinions didn't appear to be true. I can really see how this kind of posturing and teeth gnashing can get out of hand if all you're going on is someone else's unfounded opinion. Yeah, I think maybe they got him mixed up with Varg, but that's not true at all, as far as I can tell. Lepidoptera666 says, this makes sense now. Victor and Tanya de Passé. Victor is a bisexual Indian demon summoner. Check reply for link if it works, Grim. The link did not come through. I could not find Victor de Passé online anywhere, but I did find Tanya de Passé, and she is exactly the kind of person that you would think would come up with such an article. Now, being an idiot, I closed the window with the comments from the live stream, so just give me a second, because we should probably look at some of the comments over there. I probably should have posted it on my main channel, but I wanted to do it live for a couple of reasons. Okay, I'm hoping this article about the behind-the-scenes harassment in RPGs goes bigger. BossBully195 says, I'd like to think if I were in your position, I'd be reading this as triumphant justice being in black and white. However, I know that's not how everyone would. So, Jim, I gotta say, I congratulate you for the efforts in bringing this to light, even though many would rather it be buried. You're stronger than you believe, even for a left-winger. Ha ha ha. Cheers, mate. Yeah, well, thanks, I guess. Though, weirdly, this doesn't seem to be getting a huge amount of traction yet. Maybe if I put it on my main channel, more people would be picking up on it in public. I've had it sent to me back channels, this article, multiple times. I hope it gets more traction. I hope more people talk about it, and I hope the people that end up talking about it are people outside of the more rage baity end of the internet, but maybe that's a bit hopeful. It's already being suppressed on Reddit, this article, and people are trying to dress it up as it's only about Zach. So I don't hold out a huge amount of hope. Paddy's Parlour says, not even half hour through, what awful people, but I've seen it. I was told by several creators, even one that isn't in RPG publishing, rather board games, that someone I trusted was telling folks to stay away from me, and I'm pretty sure this hasn't stopped. This will not stop me from reaching out to other people. I have faith I can survive character assassination because I haven't done anything worth being assassinated. And I'd much rather establish genuine and sincere relationships with people, even at risk of being damaged for it. Yeah, I'm the same way. I hate that these people have done this, that they act like this. It is an alien mindset to me. I do not understand it. Josh Jared said, this is absolutely insane, and that's how I feel about it as well. Jay Sorryman left a huge comment, which I'm not going to read because my voice is giving out. But it basically amounts to, yeah, this is terrible. No one should be lied about, but Zach is an insufferable asshole. Which I agree with, right? Jay Sorryman also goes on to say, this article reads like it was co-written and or commissioned by Zach. I don't think it was. You can tell reading through the article that the woman who wrote it is clearly struggling with the fact that people she sees as being on her side have acted in such a way. And Zach does make a good case study for the kind of thing that has happened, and it's much more high profile than other cases such as my own. So it makes sense to use Zach as a case study, even though that has ended up apparently putting some people off. And yeah, again, to reiterate, he's a dick, but that's not illegal or necessarily wrong, and it doesn't make him wrong. Full Metal Dragon says, now it makes sense why the OSR Reddit is so messed up. Thank you for going over this article and sharing it. It really does showcase just how insidious and insane some of these people are. Yeah, like everything they accuse other people of, they are. It's very strange. Devon says, the audio won't play on the archive site. Any idea how or even if it can be recovered? Edit. Damn it, she seems to have removed the files from her SoundCloud too. I would really like to hear these quotes. I haven't read the article in full yet. I'm working on time-sensitive game jam stuff, so I'm just listening to your soothing voice recap it. But even early on, the people she's naming as harassers include some industry names I respect, mutually follow on social media, and aspire to work with or be noticed by. Yeah, feet of clay. Never meet your heroes. That is the sad part. Some of the people with the worst reputations, because of people like this, are some of the best people. And some of the people with the best reputations are actually the worst people. But hey-ho, what you going to do? Alright, that'll do. I've wonked on long enough last night and today. If you made it to the end, you're an insane, crazy person for listening to me drone on. Not sure my voice is as soothing today. Take care. Zang. "Rrrr," said the grinder as it chewed its way through Alice, from the crown of her head all the way down to her toes. It ate the lot of her, unfussy, snout to tail, and cleared its plate. It gnashed its way through her dress, her pinafore, her shoes, and her unmentionables. It chewed her hair, devoured her scalp, gobbled up her arms, wolfed down her legs, gorged itself on her torso, noshed on her skin, and gulped her down without so much as a burp to show for it.